In this video, I begin the process of weathering one of my 55H models Britannia class locomotives. Hi and welcome back to Newton Grove. Now, I've done a little bit of weathering on this channel before. I've done a 16-ton mineral wagon, albeit, in my opinion, very badly, so I will revisit that in the future. I've done the 12-ton British Railways van, and I've also done my Black 5 using powders. Now, I also took to my Facebook page a little while ago and I asked people, what would you like to see as far as weathering is concerned? And a lot of people were saying, we'd like to see things from tank locomotives to medium and big locomotives, different techniques, weathering, acrylics, airbrushing, not airbrushing, dry brushing, everything really. So I thought to myself, well, I've got quite a few locos that need weathering, so I'll make a start. And I thought to myself, a Britannia, I've wanted to do the Britannia for a while, and I've got a certain vision in my mind, so let's start with that one. Now, this video will not be the full weathering. I plan to do this in sections of maybe 2 or maybe 3 episodes, because weathering is something that you should never really rush through and do in a few hours or even just a day. I think to get a really good result, you have to do it little bit by little bit by little bit. When I did my Jubilee, for example, the base coat of weathering, that stayed on there for quite some time until I started to work out what I wanted to do as far as my details were concerned. And it probably took about 3 or 4 revisits to get it to where it is now, as far as what I classify as now the finished product of Alberta, which I'm very, very happy with. Now, I could revisit that in the future, but at the moment, I'm quite happy. So the same thing applies to the Britannia. I'm going to take you through the beginning, using the details, and getting it up to, I guess, sort of the first airbrush covering, and then we'll see how it looks from there. Now, before you weather anything, it's always really good, a fantastic idea, to use reference photographs. Now, you can either look at YouTube for archival film, jump onto Google, look at archival photographs. There's some wonderful Facebook groups out there as well, which have loads and loads of color archival photographs. I tend to find that books are the best, because at least with a book, you can have it in your hand, you can hold it, and it's there. And I'm using a book today all about Leeds, Holbeck, and the locomotives that we're seeing there on shed. And this is the book here. Now, in here there are loads of photographs of Black 5s, 8Fs, a few Eastern Region locomotives, 9Fs. There's even a WD-210O in there, which got to Holbeck at least once. But there are a handful of really lovely shots of a few Britannias over here in different stages of weathering. Some of them look absolutely filthy, and you can't even tell they're green anymore. Others, you can tell they're green, and others are sort of halfway in between. Now, the Britannia I have over here is 70049 Solway Firth. It was actually the first of my 2 Britannias that I bought. I actually bought this one because when I grew up, I remember watching Pennine Steam in the 60s. It was my favorite video to watch, and the very first Britannia I ever saw was on that video, and it just happened to be 70049 Solway Firth. So here she is. Now, I don't want to exactly represent this model toward the end of its life looking absolutely shabby, but I don't want it to look pristine either. I have my second Britannia is Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell's going to look as if it's just sort of just beyond X works, getting ready for rail to a duty. So 70049, I want to make it actually look like it's been worked quite a bit without being decrepit. So looking at my photographs over here in this book, I'm going to basically do something that's between clean-ish and filthy, because I think it's really important to really show engines as they were. Still making sure the green is being able to see through, but I want to get that grimy, sort of toward the end of steam, the last 5 years of steam look to the locomotive. So the first things first, I'm going to start by adding my details on before I do any weathering or dry brushing at all, because if I get the details on now, I can always tone them down later. And to start with the details, I'm going to be using some of these wonderful paint pens from the AK range. Now this one here is old bronze. I've also got copper, and I have chrome. And I like to use these. So for example, the old bronze and the copper I'll use for things like safety valves and some of the pipework for the injectors, for example. The chrome I'll typically use for handrails, because especially on cab sides and even the handrails on the boiler itself, because people are always climbing up and down and moving across the barrel, the paint after a while did wear down. So I do like to use chrome on those handrails. So I'm going to start with that. The other thing I'm going to do, and I'll show you this as we get to it, I've also got some nice paints from the Life Color range, some things that are usually used for dust, scratches, wood stains and other bits and pieces. but I think there's some great shades there which I can use on the Locomotive to represent cladding on pipework and a few other details. Once again, you can almost classify this as underpainting the detail before the grime goes on top. So let's get a start. I'm going to take out one of these paint pens, bring the Locomotive over to the station here, and we'll get started. Now I've got myself what they call a Lazy Susan. It's basically, it's a kitchen utensil, this particular one. It's not a modelling one, but this one is wood. And the good thing about that is I can rotate the Locomotive 360 degrees and I don't need to touch it, which is wonderful because I don't want to be smearing paint, especially these paint pens all over the Locomotive. So I'm going to start with my chrome pen. Now for reference, this is AK1302. Always give these a nice good shake up first. And as I said, the first thing I'm going to do over here is, actually I might flip the Locomotive on the side so you can actually see what I'm doing on the camera up above. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a start, just very gently, on these handrails. Now I'm not going to do the whole lot. There's a misconception when it comes to things like handrails, and you think, oh, well, I'll just paint them all chrome. Never do that, because when you're climbing up a Locomotive, you never hold on to the very bottom or the very top of the handrail. You're always holding on to just before the top and either pulling up or sliding down. So the very bottom over here would never have the paint removed, or the very top. So always just make sure that you're keeping those things in mind, because otherwise it's not going to look very realistic. Make sure that you do the side as well. It's all very well and good to do the face of it, but you need to be able to do the back of the cab as well. Now, is there anything over here that I think should go chrome? Well, as I said before, I think the handrails on the boiler, they can go a little bit chrome as well, because, as I say, people would have been up there every now and again going up to lubricate the Locomotive and clean it back in the day. So it's always good just to do a little bit. Like, don't overdo it. You want to have a hint as such. Now, it doesn't matter that it's not all covered. Like I said, same thing with the cab handrails. It's very unlikely that all the paint would have gone off completely. Now, I am going to turn the Locomotive over very gently over here, and I'm going to do the top, because when you're doing the sides, of course, you aren't doing the top at the same time. The underside we're not going to see so much when we actually put this model onto the track, so that doesn't bother me so much. The other thing I might do over here is I might just get the paint pen and just highlight some of the regulator over here as well. Not too much of it, just portions of it. Just so it's not completely green, because it never would have stayed green at all. Right, this is looking very, very good. Now, of course, what you do on one side, you have to start doing on the other side. So spin the Locomotive around, and once again, we're just going to start going over the top of the handrails here on the boiler. Be very careful to make sure you don't get the boiler itself. Tip the engine onto its side, and we can do the side of the handrail. Coming across to the cab, we'll do the handrails here as well. Now on the Britannias, the handrails go all the way up to the cab roof. Don't go chrome all the way up to the cab roof, there's no need for that. And then once again on the back as well, making sure that that paint has really gone across. Okay, now as far as the Locomotive is concerned, that's all I'm going to do, I think, for the chrome. I don't want to overdo it. So I'm just going to put that to the side for the moment. And whilst I've got the chrome pen out, I'm going to bring the tender across. And once again, do my handrails here on the front and the back, being very, very careful to make sure that you're not getting paint on the actual body of the tender, because you'll kick yourself. That's not one of those ask me how I know moments, but I've come close. Now the other thing that you can also do is, over here you've got your lamp iron brackets. And of course, because lamps are always going on and going off, they didn't retain their paint for very long. So you can get a little bit of chrome on there as well. Once again, not too much, because you want to make sure that the The bottom has still got paint on it because as the lamps are sliding on and off, you're removing the paint from the bracket, but not the actual part that holds onto the tender body itself. I'll do my handrail here, and then just on the face. So if I show the iPhone, you can just see here, you can just make out those details. So there's just the first start of the, as I say, it's the underpainting, or what I'm going to classify as underpainting. You put all these details on first before you then go ahead and do anything else. What I might also do is I might just, on the locomotive here, with our lamp iron brackets, I might just pick them out a little bit too. Not much, just a little bit. The whole idea is to do this subtly and sparingly. Okay, that's about all I think I'm going to do with the chrome pen. Now I'm going to move on to these ones. So you've got old bronze, which is AK1303, and then you've got copper, which is AK1304. Now, we could use both of them. I'll shake them both up anyway. But I'm actually going to use the copper, just because it's darker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick out things such as the safety valves and the whistle. So over the top over here, as you can see, I'm just bringing this in very, very slowly and very subtly. Now, of course, safety valves, they were always filthy, especially toward the end of steam. But when they're clean and they're warm, they do get rather tarnished. So going around here, it's amazing how much of a difference it makes just highlighting little things like this. It really is. If I turn the locomotive onto the side of just for a little bit. So being very, very gentle with this and very subtle with it. Now, I might also add that these locomotives, they've got a lot of weight to them. So if you see it jerking around here and there, it's not me being clumsy. It's the fact that there's a lot of weight in that locomotive, and even though you're trying to be careful, once it starts to go, it just goes. Now, our whistle, of course, is up the top over here. Whistles were copper, bronze, or brass really. So I'll go ahead and I'll paint our whistle. And it doesn't really bother me too much if I don't get it completely accurate, because once all the weathering is on, you're not going to see loads and loads of the details. But you will see if it's green, and the whistle was never green. Now the other thing is, a lot of the pipework over here, depending on which locomotive you look at, or which period of time you're looking at, some of the pipes were clad, others weren't. Some of them were exposed, others had the white cladding over them. So I'm going to do a combination of both. So with this pipe over here, for example, I might just pick out this one to start with and just gently just trace that down. And you can definitely start to see that coming through. We'll just always make sure that you can get all that side detail on there as well. You don't just do the surface on the top, you make sure that you do as much as you can to bring out all that detail. So you can see here on this side now, I've just picked out those lines down there. You've got the small pipes coming from the cab. I'm not overdoing this at all. I'll just go back onto the top over here and just do parts of the manifold. Now the manifold would have probably been bronze, I'm assuming, or thereabouts, but I can do it and we can tone it down again later on. So I'll just do the back like this, just highlight it You don't need to give everything a liberal covering. Just these highlights are good enough. Right, now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn our engine onto the side again. Now we have all the pipework down here for the injectors. And there's of course your injector down there. So the biggest thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that that massive big delivery pipe here is at least copper. So going in there, let's just get that paint right in there. I have a small pipe here in front of it. I don't mind if that gets a bit of overspill with the paint. When you're doing this as well, if you don't get coverage everywhere, it doesn't matter, because by the time you get the weathering on, the brass never stayed brass for very long, so there will always be heavy patches of grime, oil, soot and everything else like that. So it doesn't matter if you don't get a fully liberal coat over everything. I'll go over here and pick out the injector itself. And hopefully over there up above on the camera, you can start to see just how much of a difference this is making. All right, you can see here, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect, because once again, once the weathering goes over there, it's going to get toned down even more. But the fact now that we can see all the injector pipework and all the other associated pipework as well, I'm really loving this a lot. It brings out the model so much. It really does. So what I might just do is I might do a few more of these pipes over here, just one or two of them, and then I might cover a few of them as if they've been clad. So just on some small ones here, I might, for example, just do these ones. Maybe these very small pipes up the top over here. This casting up the top over here as well. I'll do that. I'll do the castings down here. But then for the other pipe work, we'll get some cladding onto this. Now, as I'm going through this, I'm trying to make sure that I don't also get any of this paint onto my handrails that go along the side of the boiler, because they were never copper. Okay, let's get some paint out and I'll do the cladding.
Allow me a moment to talk about 55H models. If you're serious about O-gauge, then you already know the name 55H models. They are renowned for producing exceptional museum quality brass locomotives. 55H have delivered some of the finest models in 7mm scale, in my opinion, including the mighty 9Fs, the elegant Britannias, and the iconic Duke of Gloucester. And now they've raised the bar yet again. The BR standard 5MT has now arrived, and available in both Walsharts and Caprotti valve gear, in either BR green or black liveries, and in both early and late crest versions, giving modelers the ultimate choice in accuracy and detail. The 55H standard 5s are limited to 85 models only, and they are not going to be rerun. But that's not all. 55H are also producing a limited number of the tender version BR standard 4MTs, with only 25 460s and 25 260s being made, alongside a very limited rerun of the legendary 7MT Britannias. And here's something that I think really matters. A 55H model isn't just a purchase. In my opinion, it's an investment. Due to the limited production runs and their exceptional build quality, 55H locomotives consistently hold their value, making them very easy to resell in the future if your plans ever change. In fact, if you ever see a 55H model come up secondhand, grab it, because they do not stay available for very long. These are not mass-produced models. They are precision-engineered masterpieces. So order or reserve your locomotive now at 55h.co.uk. Let's get back to the video.
Okay, to do some of the cladding now, what I've turned to the life color range, and I'm using the wood range. And this is the cold light shade of wood. So it's not white, it's sort of more of an off greyish white. And I think that'll be perfect to do the cladding over here on the side of the boiler. So looking at some photographs, I've noticed that the cladding around here to the injectors could be white. Sometimes it was wrapped a bit further down. As I said, different locomotives had cladding on different areas. I don't want to do too much of the white. I think it really is overkill. So I'm just going to just shake this up, and I'm using a very, very fine brush as well. You can see here, that's a very small brush. So I'll just charge it up. And I don't want to use too much of this. And very gently, I'm just going to go over the pipework. It's very important to use a very small, thin brush doing this, because the last thing that you want is for paint to go absolutely everywhere where you don't want it to go. At least with a small brush, you can get in exactly where you need to. It's not too thick, it's not going to hit any of the pipework, it's not going to scrape against the boiler barrel or the firebox, and you're not going to be using any colourful language. Really take your time with this process. Don't put a lot of paint on the brush, just enough to just charge it and get into just little bits at a time, and really just take your time. And just like I did with the paint pen, you need to make sure that you actually got all the sides of the pipework covered. It's all very well and good to do the side where you can see, but when you've got the locomotive on the track and you're facing it, you're going to look at the pipework and you're going to realise, hang on, the side of it's green and the front of it is white. That's a bit daft. So always make sure that you're doing all three sides. Of course, you can't get to the back side of it, but just make sure you're doing every part that you can see at least. A little bit tricky over here near the handrail. Now I'm also just going to put a little bit of white just over here on this pipework coming down, or up I should say, from the running board. I'm being very, very slow and gentle here. And watch where you're resting your arm as well, because the last thing you want to do is rest your arm on paint that's wet, and then you put that arm or the side of your wrist on your locomotive, and then within 15 minutes you think, where the hell did that splodge come from, or that thumbprint or whatever. So always be careful where you're actually resting your arms and your hands. Okay, that's looking good. Turn the locomotive up, and I can do the top of it now. So these two pipes come into the back of the manifold over here. So once again, I just need to be very careful how I do this and where I do this. Now, these models, I'm not going to lie, cost a lot of money. The Britannias, when I bought them, I think they were worth around £2,500. That's a lot of money. And there's a lot of people who are very scared to weather such an expensive locomotive. Now, of course, if you buy one of these through, for example, Alice Clark Trains, because, I mean, look, 55H are doing a rerun of the Britannias again, but if you happen to get one second hand from, say, Alice Clark Trains, they do offer a professional weathering service where you can get somebody who is very comfortable and knowledgeable doing this. So I do understand the trepidation of having a go yourself. But like I've always said with weathering, whether it be here or with all the Hornby magazine videos that we've done, buy yourself a cheap locomotive, a cheap piece of rolling stock, and just practice on that. Because the techniques and skills that you learn there, you can transfer to a 100-pound locomotive or a 1,000-pound or more locomotive. So never dive into a weathering project without building up your experience first. We can see here, it's just enough. It's just enough to just pick out the details and make it look a little bit different. And I really like it. I really, really like that. Now, I also do have a big pipe that comes over here on this side. I might do one on the driver's side as well, just for a bit of interest's sake, really. The good thing with this white paint, it's white enough to give you detail, but it's not stark white. You never want to use pure white for something like this. It really just is far too much. Whereas this particular one, this cold light shade from the wood range of the Life Color series, I think it's perfect because it's just got that nice color tone to it. And it's not bright white, which of course is what you do not want. Most important thing, put the lid on the paint each time you've finished. You do not want to be knocking paint all over a locomotive that you're in the middle of weathering, because you're going to cry. I've heard of it happening. Now, I don't think I need to add any more white to this. I actually think that that's looking really, really good. Now, there's a few other small bits of the pipework over here that I might just go off and pick out. So I'll just go along the locomotive, finish all that, and then we'll get to the next step. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is just add a few more details into my boiler barrel. Now, I'm using weathered black here from the rail weathering pack from the Life Color range. And what I wanted to do on this one is, there's all the washout plugs on the boiler. And I just like to go in there and just get a bit of depth into there before I start to get the airbrush out. So, for example, over here, I've got this washout plug. Now I'm just putting a little bit of paint on my brush over here. And the whole idea is to just create that depth to these areas. So I've got a washout plug over here. I've got one over here near the clack valve. I've got one here above the firebox. And these covers on top of the firebox. Now once again, we're just doing this very subtly. It's so subtle that you probably won't be able to see it on camera too easily, but it is there nonetheless. Don't be afraid to go over there once or twice and just build up the depth of the color. And we'll go on to the other side now. I think that adding these details in before you start spraying the entire body will probably just make a huge difference. I might also add that I've never done it this way before. This is just a technique that I'm now just developing myself. The more you weather, the more you start to think about, what if I did things this particular way? Or what if I tried this technique? Or, you know, it's all about trial and error. I can't for the life of me see that British Railways would have painted all their manhole covers and washout plugs green to match the boiler barrel. And that's sort of my logic here. So, adding all this depth in now, yeah, it's looking good. Now, of course, I've got the washout plugs on the side of the firebox as well, so I'll do them. I'm using a small brush again for this because, once again, you do not want to have a massive brush where suddenly your paint goes everywhere that it shouldn't go. Just taking my time with this, just to really just get a good drop of paint onto each of those plugs. I think the weather black looks fantastic. Now the other thing I could do is, I've got some Tamiya NATO black, which I might just add in, especially to these manhole covers at the top, because this is a little bit darker. And it will just help me just add a bit of depth to the actual handles themselves. Once again, I'm trying to be very, very careful here, only using small bits of paint. The NATO black and the weathered black aren't all too different, to be honest, but there are subtle changes. The other thing I also might do is the manifold at the top here. I actually might paint that by hand, NATO black. This would have been absolutely filthy, and it's going to get toned down anyway, but I think having it NATO black as a base will look really good by the time I actually get the airbrush in there. Now the other area I'm going to do is the regulator, or just between the regulators. So over here on the driver's side, I'll try and do it from this side so you can see what I'm doing. We've got everything inside here as well. So just with my NATO black, I'll just get the paintbrush in there because that was always dirty. And then the actual regulator itself, I'll put a little bit on there. All right, that's looking really good. And then the regulator extends from here. It opens up in there, but of course it comes into this part of the back of the smoke box. So I might just tone down a little bit of this as well, just so we've actually got a slightly different color here. I don't mind applying this straight on, because like with everything else, it's going to get toned down. And same thing, I suppose, with the ejector as well. I might also just tone this down with the NATO black, just so it's, once again, a little bit different. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, Jonathan, you're not referencing the photographs as you go along. No, I'm not. Two reasons for that. Number one, I study them quite a bit between each filming take. The other thing is I've worked on Steam for quite a long time, and at least I sort of have a good idea of what's brass, what's not, what gets dirty, what doesn't get dirty. I'm no expert, far from it, but I do know for a fact that, you know, adding these little highlights here and there, they are definitely something that is not going to be an injustice to the Locomotive. The other thing I also might do here is I might just do the top of our steps on the firebox, just very gently, sort of like a half dry brushed look, just to tone that down a little bit. And then at the very front of the Locomotive, I might just with some highlights here, just do the front as well. I mean, that's going to obviously get more filthy as we go along, but I'm just gently now just toning this down. Now, before I do anything else, I'm just saying to myself, is there anything that I should, is there anything else I should do before I start to get the airbrush out that I should sort of underpaint as such? I don't know. I just don't know. Purely because most other things will get taken care of with the airbrush, and then of course when we get in there with other things such as washes and powders, we'll definitely get more details there. So no, look, I think that's good. So I'll show you some detail shots here now, and you can really see the effects of this, as I say, underpainting technique as such. Just adding in the highlights of the pipework, the cladding, the strip paint on the handrails, and just the dark areas in the washout plugs and the manhole covers. I think that's a really good base way to start the Locomotive, and we can now get our weathering mixture together and start going over this Locomotive to make it look a bit more work stained. Right, so we've now come to the part that most people start to get very nervous and squeamish at, and that is actually weathering the Locomotive itself with an airbrush. Now, to begin with, for our first base coat, I'm using Tamiya. This is NATO Black. The code is XF69. I just find this, it's a really good weathered black. I think it's going to help to just give a really nice soot base around the entire Locomotive and tender, and then we can use that and then add to it as well. So the aim of what's going to happen now is to get a good coating over the Locomotive, then the tender. Some parts will be heavy, some parts won't be so heavy, and then we can add different colors as we go and build up. Now, I've already pre-filled my airbrush over here. I put my thinners in first. That's actually an Ian Rathbone technique. So I put my thinners in there. I've then put the paint in there. So I'll give this a spray. Now, disclaimer, I'm not wearing a mask. This is my house. This is a very well ventilated environment. And hey, it's my rule. So let's just make sure the paint's coming out nicely, which it is. All right, so moment of truth. So what I'm going to do is I always start just putting a little bit of air and paint onto this Lazy Susan, just to sort of see what the flow is going to be. Right, and then I'll open it up. There you go, now I'm happy with that. And I'll just start to literally just go in here now and very slowly just start to weather the locomotive. And you can really see it on the black. Not so much on the green just yet, but it's there. So we'll do everything. We'll do our cylinders, do our wheels, do the firebox, the whole thing. This is just to tone it down. Now I'm doing a little bit more under the boiler. The good thing about being on the Lazy Susan is I can just turn the locomotive. I'll do our full plate over here. Do underneath the locomotive as well. And then move along to this side. I'll put a bit more at the very top, because that didn't get cleaned hardly ever. I'm doing a bit more heavily under the barrel. And then once again we go under here for our firebox on top of the boiler, moving across to our smoke deflectors. Our cylinders, the wheels, the motion, everything. You can really start to see the locomotive being toned down now. Every now and again you get a few spits from the airbrush. I don't mind that too much because it sort of does give a random look and effect to the weathering. Now I'm actually just going to close the top of our roof here, just so that there's no thick black paint underneath. I can always reopen the roof later. Right. This is starting to look nice. Do the front of the locomotive. Do inside the smoke deflectors. Trying to make sure that we get absolutely everything. Do the chimney, do across the top of the barrel, and do the same thing going backwards this way too. Now this is starting to look toned down very nicely, so I'll keep going in there with our wheels and our motion. We're going to make the motion gear look a lot more filthy later on, but I just want to tone everything down. Now the firebox always was a bit more filthy because even when they were being cleaned, getting the rags and everything behind all those pipes was never easy. Even on preserved locos today, that's always the part that's the most filthy around the firebox. I'll do the same thing on the driver's side again. Now if you take your time with everything, and we're not rushing through this, you can see that it's just it's being toned down very nicely, very slowly. And because I'm just doing it gently and lightly, it's subtle. You never want to be heavy-handed with an airbrush because it's a lot easier to add things in and add more detail on later rather than take everything off. That is looking really, really good. Now, the one thing I do like about 55H locomotives is the fact that you can push the locomotive to turn it and the wheels spin, which is great, which means I can really get in here, make sure the motion gear is really weathered down, and that when the wheels finally spin around on the track, we're not going to have the lines on the wheels where the rods were when I was doing the airbrushing. We're going to make this far more filthy on the rods later on. But like I said, we're just now toning down the wheels properly and the frame. Okay, I'll push you back a little bit so you're centered. Come and do the front here. Doing the fronts of the cylinders, and now we'll do the back of the cab as well. Just under there, that always got filthy. We'll actually spray inside a little bit too, just so the back's got some weathering on it. This is looking lovely. And finally, we'll just go over the top here, the very, very top of the boiler, and back onto the cab as well. Firebox, making sure that's a bit more dark. The top of the barrel, especially near the dome, that always was a lot more filthy. Yeah, this is really, really looking good. As you can see here, we're also starting to tone down all that brass pipe work that we did before as well. So that is our locomotive done, or at least the base coat done, which is looking absolutely brilliant. Now, it's crucial that I don't touch the locomotive with my fingers, because otherwise I'm going to start getting fingerprints all over it, and I don't want that, especially with this fresh paint. But what I can do is I can literally hold it underneath the cab roof and the floor plate, because there's no paint there. And I can just put it to the side, bring our tender over, and then start the exact same process. So with the tender, just really toning that down, nice and light to begin with. Just up and down motion. Just get a nice light coverage over the body of this. The back can afford to be a bit more heavy than the rest of it, because the back of the tenders, as we've seen in those reference photographs, did get filthy. So do the top, do into all the nooks and crannies here in the tender, do our pilot beam on both sides, from down and around, spin our tender around. Really get in there, you want this really mooted down. You can also afford to get the airbrush very close to the model. You can see here just how close I actually have got the brush. Now, we'll do the face. These doors are going to flap like crazy, I think. Yep. So you can see here, we're just toning this down nice and gently. But it is looking very, very good. Do the frame. The frames of the tenders, as we've seen in the photographs, got very, very dirty, so you can afford to be a bit more heavy-handed with the frame. The top over here, especially where the coal goes, like you get a lot of coal dust in there coming down, so you can be a little bit more heavy around there. And we will get into the actual coal space, just to tone that down a little bit. We will get in there properly much, much later. and weather that with powders, but it's not such a bad idea to just get in there and do a bit with the airbrush right now. When you're doing this, it's always good to have the Locomotive and the tender near each other so that you can basically compare how they're looking. You don't want to have the tender looking completely different to the rest of the Locomotive because it's going to look odd otherwise. This is looking lovely. And now I'm just going to go in there and really open this up and just get a lot of that paint on. Tone the whole thing down. Right, now I'm going to be using the flat black. Now, apologies, I've already done the tender. It's just my iPhone ran out of storage. So just take the fact that that has been done, and now I'm going to turn to the Britannia. I'll show everything to you very soon anyway. So what I've done is I mixed up, once again, consistency of flat black with some thinners. I've done mostly the top of the tender so that the coal dust is coming down. I haven't overdone it too much, but now I'm going to make sure I got some matte black on our Locomotive as well. So let's just get it flowing through here. There it goes. All right, and we're just going to do this very gently now, just over the top. Around the firebox, around the manifold, and definitely around the safety valves as well. What I'm also aiming for is to do mostly vertical streaks. Hopefully you can start to see over here on the video that all that pipework that we did very early on in this weathering project is starting to get covered up now and really toned down. So I'll do the roof. And on top of the firebox again, over the dome. I really want this Britannia to look dirty. Not to the point where you can't see it's green anymore, but I want it to be dirty. So the top of the boilers and the firebox and the domes were always absolutely filthy, as were the sides of the fireboxes. The secret to weathering is just take your time. Never ever rush it. Do over here in front of the cab windows. Get in there a little bit closer so we can get some of this detail coming through the pipework. It was always filthy back there. Do around the manifold. Do under the boiler barrel as well, just to give me a bit of light and shade as such. And do the front of the cab. Do the top there. Yeah, she's definitely starting to look the part now. Now I am putting on a lot of black, but that's all going to get fixed very soon. I might do a bit of the cylinders, just a little bit. Not too much, maybe some of the smoke deflectors as well. I'll do some more of the pilot beam and the buffers. And I'll just do a little bit of our motion gear as well. Just nice and close in there, just to darken it down a little bit. Right, there you go. So we can start to see now that the Britannia is definitely looking a lot more filthy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to add in some frame dirt. I want to start to get that kind of mucky look. So over here I have the frame dirt from the Life Color range, and I'm just going to this is very thick, this stuff, because a lot of the thinners have sort of disappeared from it. I'm going to put a nice big dollop of that in there. And I'm going to keep mixing as I go along, because it's important to, because I'm mixing this with the black, it's important to start to get that mucky look rather than a black look. I want it to look that really, you know, mucky brown that we've seen so often in archival photographs and films. Okay, we're good to go. So because this is now my mucky mixture, I'm going to make sure it's going on the entire locomotive, top and bottom. And I'm going to randomize this. I want to make sure that it's going everywhere. It's not meant to be covering up the black. It's meant to be blending in with the black. When it comes to the boiler barrel, I'm going in vertical streaks over here, as you can see. But when it comes to down below, then I'm just going from side to side. Front of the cylinders over here, I want to make sure I'm really getting in there. Now, I want to make sure that the pilot beam is still black, so I'm just going to spray along the front of the smoke box here, and then just across the boiler, just across the smoke box like that. Make sure we're doing the inside of all the smoke deflectors. Now, I need to be careful because I'm about to bend my steps. Do the other side now. When you're airbrushing, it's very, very crucial that you just take your time. It's very, very easy to overdo things if you rush through it, or if you just apply too much too soon. So over the firebox, around the edges, over the boiler. I want this engine to look filthy. Do the wheels, do the firebox, a bit more heavy on the firebox. I really want to be able to see that color difference. And you can see there it's really toning down all that wonderful pipework that we picked out earlier. Once again, move our engine a little bit just so we can get into our motion gear. Turn down the side of the cab as well. The roof. Doesn't matter if we go over the numbers, we're going to bring them back a little bit later. And then back down here onto the wheels and a motion gear. Move the engine forward a little bit. Forward again. You want to make sure that motion gear is not creating any form of sort of shadow as such on your wheels. And now I'm just going to go over from a distance and just give it just a liberal coating of grime. I'll just hone back here on the cab a little bit, just tone that number down. Okay, that's looking good. I'm very happy with that. Now, I'm going to now do the same with the tender. So I will lift my locomotive up once again from under the cab and under the buffers, so I'm not touching all that paint. And I'll bring the tender in. And we'll just do exactly the same thing. So always start the paint off the model. And I'm going to come down here first and do most of the frame. Okay, we'll do the other side as well. You can see here, obviously, I'm turning the model onto its side. I want to make sure I'm getting underneath the tank. Getting a lot of paint onto that frame just to really start to tone it down. It's important, of course, to move the tender so the wheels aren't all just patchy. Get some paint to the bottom. Put a little bit of this inside the coal space. We're going to get back to the coal space at a later time. Do some more over here into the front of the tender. Okay, this is starting to look really lovely. Okay, right, well, that for now is about as far as I'm going to go. So I've basically put on my NATO black, I've then put on some flat black, and then of course now we've just added some frame dirt. That is now going to be the base weathering for this locomotive, and I think it's going to be a good place to almost stop. The only thing I am going to do, which is very, very important to do, let me just take the tender off, bring our loco back. Before everything dries, what you need to do, this is a necessity, you need to do this. Get yourself a cotton bud and some thinners. You need to go over your windows. Because if you do this now, while the paint is still wet, then most of it comes off. You do not want to have these windows full of paint. Using a cotton bud, it's wonderful because they still look mucky because you're not getting everything off. But at least you're lifting some of it off because you don't want these windows to be so filthy that the crews can't see through them or you can't see through them. The other thing that you can do at this time, if you want to, is you can also just come onto the cab side and just take off some of the weathering from the numbers. Do this in a downward vertical motion. It's always nice to make sure that the numbers on the locomotive are actually readable. And we are going to be going over this again and again, but if we just do this now, at this particular time, then we are always ahead of the game and we're not trying to take away caked on paint later on. Okay, there we are. I might just do a little bit on the plate. And again on this one, not too much. I want to make sure they're still filthy. Okay, we are going to leave it there then. So that now is my base weathering for the Britannia. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually say to yourself, well, I'm quite happy with that. That can be my final weathering because, look, to be honest with you, it looks really good. It does hold up. No one's going to look at that and go, well, it's not finished. Apart from maybe the fact we haven't got a coal load in the tender with a bit of, rust and gunk in the actual tender body. The engine is actually looking really good. It's looking rather work stained, and I'm very, very happy with that. So, but this is already a long video, so we're not going to go into all the other details. So in the next video, we will start to go into using some powders to bring out more things with rust. We'll add more frame dirt or rust colors to the tender frame, the wheels and other bits and pieces, the firebox as well, because that was always rusty and a completely different shade. You can see from some of those photographs earlier on that the fireboxes were always a different color. So there's a lot more to do on this locomotive. But I hope that for part one, you have at least seen that it's not scary. If you just take your time, you're just using very base colors, very lightly, and the importance of what I classify as underpainting, doing all those details first. As you can see, when we go over that with the airbrush, it really does help to dull everything down and tone everything down. So I'm very happy with this. And for a model that's worth almost £3,000, trust me, it's daunting, but I do feel safe in the knowledge that at least I'm taking my time and it's looking good as I go along. Right, Thank you so much to all my channel members and channel Patreon members as well. I really appreciate your support. And if you'd like to become a member of either Patreon or YouTube, click on the join button below or just visit the Patreon link. Join up there. You get to see a lot of behind the scenes videos, access to things that the general public don't see. And of course, you get to see things such as the Rosegrove layout build that I'm building for somebody else, which is really coming along. And to be fair, I'm actually quite jealous it's not my own layout. So if you'd like to become a member of either, I'd really appreciate that. Please subscribe. Subscribing is free, as Charlie Bishop says, and comment below, are you into weathering? Would you like to learn weathering, or is weathering something that just really scares you? Weathering used to scare me a lot, but once again, get some cheap models. The more you do it, the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Never, ever, ever try to weather a 3,000-pound locomotive if you haven't weathered a 30-pound locomotive. So whatever it is, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Any questions, any tips, any advice? If you think I'm doing something wrong, let me know. I just want to hear from you either way. Okay, right, I'm going to let all this dry. I'm going to go off and have a brew, and I'll see you next time on Newton Grove.